Today we're looking at 127, Psalms 127, 5 verses. Once again, dynamite packed in 5 little verses. Except the Lord build a house, we labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waiteth, but in vain. Keith Green did a beautiful song on this. But it's also very well known within the church, very quoted, has to do with building a house and making sure that God is in control of the building of your house. You're laboring in vain. Jesus even remarked on this concept when he talked about a man that was building large barns. And then he said he had enough for many years, and the answer from God was, "Thou fool, your soul is required of you this night." The Lord needs to build your house. You'll labor in vain, except the Lord keep the city. He is the watchman over the city. The watchman looks in vain. It is vain, and the word vain, to take something in vain, is to do something that's profitless or useless or will not, answer the call of what needs to be done. It's like using the wrong wrench or going in the wrong direction. Going 5 miles down the road and turning back. Well, that 5 miles was in vain. It is in vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for he giveth his beloved sleep. The children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. That God wants us to have many children, that he has set it up that way, and that a man should look as arrows in the hand of a mighty man, so are the children of his youth. To have a family early in life, to have many children early. We're not in our culture talking below 18, of course, but that a man should find a wife and a woman find a husband early in life and start providing for children, and happiness is found within having children and having a wife. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies at the gate. The idea that when a man has children, he raises them right unto the Lord. They are the ones who are at the gate talking against the enemies, speaking against the enemies. The idea that later on when a fellow named Rabshakeh goes against Hezekiah and they speak from the gates. The gate is where laws are made. The gate is where justice is done, and you can speak with the enemies. When the enemies come to the gate, they'll be able to speak with them. Anyway, lots of power packed in here. Go use the grid on it. It's a very beautiful song. Lots in there to look at. We're kind of told these days that having arrows is a bad thing. It's going to eat up resources for yourself, but a man dying as a millionaire is still a man dying. So, find a good woman if you're a man. If you're a woman, find a strong man. God wants you to have these arrows and that are happy as the man, and you can put happy as the woman that has his or her quiver filled with them. Going back to the story of David in 2 Samuel, it's taken a turn for the worse. It's going downhill. When we see, again, this all started with David taking of Bathsheba and murdering Uriah. Nathan tells him, and God tells him that his house is now going to be a house to where he's going to raise up evil from among his house. And we just got finished talking about houses and arrows. Here, God's going to go within the very house of David. David at this point had other wives, and he had 6 to 8 children by different wives within his. And at that time it was okay. Now it's not. But at that time God was allowing man to have several wives. But he chose Bathsheba. After the death of the child, God has Solomon being born, and he says again, the Lord loved him, the Lord committed to him, and he is going to take through Solomon to continue the kingship, the kingdom. And this will go on until Jesus, and of course Jesus will be the last king, the great king, the only king. We also have where Amnon went and conspired with his cousin Jonadab to basically he was stalking Tamar. He was vexed with her. He wanted her. He lusted after her. He just wanted to have her. He didn't want to have her as a wife. He wasn't looking at the wifely things that he could have done, that she could have done. Ironically, it's by acting like a good wife, in a sense of taking care of him and wiping his brow and making sure he's got food and that he's nurtured. It's ironic that these very characteristics are what put her in this place that she might be raped. It wasn't her fault. That's not what I'm saying. She was a good woman in a place, and a very bad man took advantage of her. There was a conspiracy. A conspiracy is when you've got the second level deception going on. Jonadab had gotten together and told Amnon, pretend you're being sick. I don't think at one instance am I saying that Tamar had anything to do with what happened to her. She was being a good woman, doing what good woman does. And he was being a bad man. He had found a way to do it. Jonadab just helped him do it. And she goes and says that you're casting me out is even worse of you forcing yourself on me. But he cast her out. He hates her now. And she goes and rents her garments, the garments of the king's daughters that she wore, saying that she was a virgin. She rent those garments, took it away, put ashes on her forehead, and cried. Her brother found out about it. Instead of going for justice through David and through the law, he decides to be quiet, and he's going to work a long conspiracy to kill his brother. And she goes and lives in his house all of his life. She never marries, never has a child. And he waits for 3 years. Or 2 years, sorry, 2 full years. He calls for a party at his house. He invites all the king's sons. He tells them that if, at the moment, Amnon comes in and he gets drunk, at my call, kill him. And so his servants do that. They kill him. The boys flee, thinking their lives are in danger. And it comes back to David that Absalom has killed all the sons. David is grief-stricken that all of his sons would be killed by Absalom. Then he finds out later by Jonadab, who seems to have jumped from one son to the other, that it wasn't all the sons. It was only Amnon, and Amnon was killed by Absalom because of what he did to Tamar. And the king's sons came back, and there was grieving and there was crying, and Absalom fled and goes off to Geshur, and David mourned for his son every day. And Absalom was gone for 3 years, and David mourned for him. He consoled himself over the loss of Amnon, but he's mourning that he's separated from Absalom. We have Absalom's return coming in chapter 14, where Joab sees that the king's heart is for Absalom, and he's wanting to create, bridge this gap. He hires a woman to come in. She's a wise woman from Tekoa, and tells her to tell him a story. And when he rules on this story, we're going to flip the story back on the king. A little bit of what Nathan did. Nathan told a story, remember, of the man that had many sheep and took the sheep of the one guy, the one poor man, and used that sheep to feed his friends. Nathan told that story and then said, you are the man. So here we have this lady. She puts herself in sackcloth. She goes before the king. And she tells David that I have had 2 sons, and they fought together. No one was there to break them up, and one killed the other. Now my family wants to kill the son that murdered the other son. But the problem is, that's the heir. That's the one that will get the inheritance. And I need your protection so that my family does not kill the son. And the king says, go to thine house. I will give charge concerning thee. And she says, O Lord, my king, the iniquity be on me and my father's house, and the king and the throne be guiltless. What she's saying is, if this boy does get killed, if you choose for him to die, the guilt won't be on you. The guilt is on our fault. And she's calling out for mercy, that in mercy the king will spare this guilty son. And so the king says, whatever ought unto thee, bring him to me, and he shall not touch thee by any more. I pray thee, let the king remember that the Lord thy God hath, that thou should not suffer the avengers of blood to destroy any more, lest they destroy my son. So she wants him to stop the avengers of blood. Again, vengeance is coming up. We see vengeance happening in the kingdom, that people are wanting to take vengeance. Normally, when this happens, they were supposed to go to the law. The law is about justice. We have a choice in our societies, either justice or vengeance. This is what you do when you have sin. There can either be justice or vengeance. And here we see vengeance raising its head among the people. We had vengeance with Absalom. It's interesting that Absalom kind of did what David did. David created a conspiracy to kill Uriah with Joab. And here Amnon used a conspiracy to rape Tamar. And then Absalom created a conspiracy, or Amnon, a conspiracy to kill Amnon. So we see this vengeance things. I will take vengeance. And then there was no justice for that murder. that Absalom ran off and stayed in Geshur, and David longed for him. But there was no going to the law. Now we see the story that there's vengeance among the people, but there's the vengeance in the story. And he's saying that to keep away from the revenges of blood anymore. As the Lord liveth, there shall not be one hair of thy head fall to the earth. I pray, and the woman said, I pray thy handmaiden, I pray, speak one more word unto the king. And she starts saying now that, well, if you're going to forgive my son and reconcile my son to my family, why don't you reconcile Absalom to your family? Why don't you bring away the banished within your own house? So see, now she's flipped the script on him. She tells the story, which wasn't true, about the two sons, and then when he rules that, well, I'm going to keep the revenger of the blood away from the older boy that killed the other boy. And she goes, well, then, if you're connecting that and you're keeping the revenger away, bringing back the banished, she says, she makes a point that we must die and are not as water spilt on the ground that cannot be gathered up. Neither doth God respect any person, yet doth he devise means that his banished may not be expelled from him. See, God creates a way for the banished to come back. And that, of course, is through shed blood. Now, there's no shed blood here, so the king is just forgiving. I'm not sure how legal that is. I don't know if the king had that right, but he might have under God to call back the banished. But she says he does, that he should call back the banished. Now, therefore, I have come to speak this thing unto the king, because the people have made me afraid, and thy handmaid has said, I will now speak with the king. It may be that the king will perform my request. For the king will hear to deliver his handmaid out of the hand of the man that would destroy me and my son together out of the inheritance of God. So the idea that she went before the people were concerned. Joab saw the people were concerned about what was going on with David and Absalom. So Joab moves to get this woman to, I know this is a little complex, but it's interesting to see the dynamics that are going on, but also to see the connections. Again, seeing that there's a pattern showing, the pattern between what David did and what Absalom did, the pattern showing of what David did and what Amnon did. And now we see a pattern of bringing back the banished, but there's no justice. We'll see later on that Absalom will start trying to slowly take the kingdom away from David, very slowly, by wooing and winning the hearts of the people. And so we see this, again, another conspiracy happening. Later on, we'll see in the next chapter, which I won't get to today, where Amnon starts conspiracy against his own father, the king. And so we never find Solomon using conspiracy. We never say a good, just man, a just leader, will not use conspiracy to get his way. He'll use justice. He'll use the word. He'll use God. A man of God, a Christian, should not be using conspiracy, conspiring with friends or stuff to get his way. He should go to the law and see what the law of God says about it. So we see this gets a little complex here. Joab wants, and the people are concerned about David. So he says, hide not from me, I pray thee, this thing that I'll ask thee. The woman says, is not the hand of Joab with thee? So he's starting to get the idea that Joab is talking to this woman. And we get the idea also that Joab is standing there among other mighty men. So this woman comes in and tells the story. He rules on the story for the protection of the son and bringing back the banished. Then she flips the script and tells him, well, why don't you bring back your own banished? And he starts to gather that this is a Joab. I don't think he gets mad about it. She calls him wise. She uses a lot of respected terms. So to fetch says that Joab, but according to you are says to David, according to the wisdom of an angel, to know all the things that are on the earth. It's like she kind of butters him up a little bit, that you're so smart that we knew you'd catch on. She says, as my soul liveth, my king, none can turn the right hand or the left, or aught that my lord the king hath not spoken. For thy servant Joab bade me, and he put all this in my hands. To fetch with this form of speech hath thy servant Joab, once again, thy servant Joab done this thing. And my Lord is wise, according to all the wisdom of an angel of God, to know all the things that are in the earth. So he calls Joab over and says, behold, I have done this thing Go, therefore, bring the young man Absalom. But he doesn't bring the Absalom back to the court. In fact, Absalom does not see the king for many years to come. So Joab fell to the ground, and he thanked the king. And Joab, today thy servant knows I have found grace in the sight of my lord the king, and that the king has fulfilled the request of his servant. And Joab went to Geshur and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. The king said, let him have his own house, but let him not see my face. So Absalom returned to his own house and saw not the king. But in all Israel there was none that was so praised as Absalom for his beauty. From the sole of his foot unto the crown of his head, there was no blemish on him. Now we see here, when Absalom comes back, that he's more like Saul was in Saul's prime. Tall, beautiful, really good looking. He had this long, thick hair that he would cut off every year, and it was very heavy. He was a beautiful, strong, vibrant man, and this was attractive to the people. They were attracted to him. Remember, David was just a normal man, kind of ruddy, nice looking, but we don't see where he actually stands out. But this son got his genes from his granddad. I don't know, got his genes maybe from Boaz or somebody, but he looked a lot like Saul in countenance. We get the idea here. And Absalom had a daughter he named Tamar, again after his sister. And he dwelt in Jerusalem 2 years and saw not the king. So here's the deal that I'm starting to see a small conspiracy going here. He's there for 2 years. He doesn't see the king. The king doesn't want to see him. And he's trying to connect with Joab because he wants to see the king. And Joab won't listen to him, so he goes and sets Joab's field on fire. This gets Joab's attention. And he goes, why? And then there's, why did you set my barley on fire? Come hither, and I will send thee to the king, he says. Therefore am I come from Geshur. It was only good for me to have stayed there. Now therefore let me see the king's face. If any iniquity be with me, let him kill me. He wants to see his dad. I don't know what his motivations here. Again, we have to be careful in drawing conclusions amongst the evidence. Sometimes the evidence can look both ways. Is his heart for his dad? Or is his heart in a conspiracy to get power? I don't know exactly what's going on here. I'll leave that for you to look at and glean. We do see him take a power play in the next chapter, so that might lean to where this is. He's away from his dad. I don't know if Joab is actually going to conspire with him right now in this story, but he's creating a league with him and Joab. I want to see the king. The king won't see me. You need to make sure I go see the king. So Joab came to the king and told him, and when he had called Absalom, Absalom came to the king and bowed himself to his face before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. There is reconciliation here. Is it real? Is it political? I mean, we'll kind of wait to see. We get some ideas of the characteristics of Absalom in the next chapter. So this has been there's been a lot going on in this one chapter. It seems I'm doing one chapter at a time here for a while, and there's a lot here to look at. And I know I'm kind of a little bit back and forth trying to discern what am I really seeing. Sometimes I'll see things when I do the study beforehand, and I want to tell about it, and then I'll see other things, other connections, and then I have to stop and go, but is that a real connection? Am I really seeing? I kind of like the idea of some of these detective dramas where they will sit and look at the evidence and look at threads of theory about what could be what, but they stick with what goes clearest with the evidence. What goes clearest with the evidence? Does it make more sense that Absalom actually loves his dad, or does it make more sense that he is a long con man who makes conspiracies? Well, we saw that he was long conning with his brother for 2 years. Was he a long con with David? And will he draw in Absalom to create more of a power base? Or will Absalom draw in Joab to create a stronger power base? There's a lot going on here, but I like, and then the bringing back of Absalom. Is that a conspiracy? Does Joab want to bring back Absalom so that he might join the reign of Absalom away from David? Once again, there's a lot going on. And this is that point in the TV show where you kind of go, I thought it was the doctor, but now it might be the nurse. I thought it was, the chemist, but maybe it was the teacher. It's okay to have those questions within this. It's okay to look down and go, I'm not 100% sure, but it will show itself. If you stick with the grid has been good so far. The grid has not let me down. And if I will stick with the grid, I will know more about what I'm going. And a little bit of this, I'm kind of doing this, taking you through it as I'm going through it and trying to draw conclusions within myself. And I think that's a good thing. So we can go, well, what's the connections here? What are their motivations? What's this character doing and why? And what does the grid work say? I'm so struggling with the fact that so many conclusions, so many pastors, so many teachers that will step on the gas on this just one way and then people just Xerox. Look at the grid work, see what it says, draw your own conclusions before God. I think these are interesting dynamics, interesting personalities of things going on, both above the scene and what's happening underneath. Again, Joab is using a little bit of a conspiracy here in telling the story to get David to rule for bringing back Absalom. So, in any case, we see these things going on two levels. Let's look at it within the grid and see what it's really saying. It can be a little confusing, but hold on tight. The grid has never let us down. Thank you.